Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. New information from the Bureau of Labor Statistics finds that it wasn't just people moving during the COVID years.
What else?
Well, it's people moving with their businesses.
Oh, yeah. I'll take that with me. Thanks.
While business migration fell during the 2001 and 2007 to '09 economic downturns, moves accelerated during the COVID lockdowns. Interesting contrast. New York led in net business outmigration, 487, followed by California, Illinois, of course, Maryland, Pennsylvania. In the Wall Street Journal suggests that the figures probably underestimate the business migration that occurred early in the pandemic since they don't capture larger firms shifting headquarters or workforces to other states. For example, Texas saw a spike in headquarter relocations in 2020 and 2021, more than half of which came from California. And I know it's 487 net businesses out migrating from New York or 208 from Illinois. Yeah, 208 of thousands of business, not a big deal. It's just like saying 144,000 people leaving, as we discussed with Ted Dabrowski, the net out migration in Illinois in 2021. That's not a big deal in a state of 12.5 million people.
Yeah, but it is a big deal if it's Caterpillar, Ken Griffin's company, Citadel. I mean, that's kind of a big deal, don't you think?
Well, it is a big deal, and it's also a big deal because if a state's not growing, it's dying. So the fact that we're dying at a glacial pace doesn't really mitigate the fact that you're going in the wrong direction. Could it get worse? Well, sure, it could get worse, but these numbers aren't good. That's sort of the point, isn't it? And interestingly, where the states moved, with the exception of North Carolina, they're states without income taxes, like Texas and Florida, Tennessee. Also, another interesting study, just to give you some perspective on this, what individual people and business owners are doing in terms of some simple back-of-the-envelope math. Smart Asset estimated that an individual earning $200,000 in Manhattan would save $64,000 in taxes and the cost of living by moving to Miami.
Oh, my gosh. And it's a better spot. I mean, well.
So you save about a third of what you earn by making the move to New York, from New York to Miami, and then you get to be warm, too. Someone making $650,000 would come out ahead by almost $200,000.
Wow.
I mean, again, a little less than a third. Those are big numbers. Higher earners in San Francisco would save about 25% of their income by moving to Miami. They didn't do Illinois, but you can estimate. I mean, just off the top, you're going to save 15%. Illinois to anywhere in Florida. Also, again, just doing some comparisons here as we assess who's where post-COVID. Higher unemployment. California, 4.5% unemployment. Illinois, 4.2%. New York, 4%. The national average is 3.7%. Florida, it's 2.6%. So Illinois has a unemployment rate that's about 60% higher than the state of Florida. Is that interesting to anybody? Jobs, businesses, take-home pay, home value. Does this interest anybody? I don't know in Illinois. Steve Moore joins us now, economist, author of Govzilla. Steve, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, good morning, guys. By the way, I think I have a solution to Illinois' problems. I really do. Dan and Amy, you ready for it?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sitting down, Stephen.
You build a Berlin Wall around the state so that people are not allowed to leave.
That's about it.
Yeah.
That's
that would solve all your problems.
Yeah, but our governor's still in denial. And even though we lost a congressional seat because of the population decline, he always, fidgets with the numbers and say everything's okay here.
But the COVID thing is interesting because, COVID should be a significant part of the conversation this election cycle, shouldn't it?
Well, it should. I mean, look, the blue states like Illinois, like New York, like Connecticut, like California are the ones that completely shut down their economies. I remember talking about this with you guys back in, April of 2020. When is Illinois going to reopen? Because a lot of the red states like Florida and Utah and Tennessee and Texas, for the most part, stayed open. And the lingering memories of this kind of Stalinistic approach, where you weren't even, I think they even had curfews in Chicago. It really had a lasting impact. But this has been going on for years and years and years. I think I mentioned this statistic to you guys last week, but for those who weren't listening in, I'll repeat it, that 100 years ago, Chicago had a bigger population than it does now. Can you believe that? I mean, the United States total population has tripled over that period, and Chicago actually has fewer residents than it did in 1900 and in 1950. And that acceleration out of the state has only become a bit of a stampede. And it's sad because, look, I love Chicago. You guys know this. I grew up in Chicago, practically grew up in Wrigley Field. It is a great, great city, but it is just being ruined by progressive policies. And one of the policies that would really help, you mentioned taxes, Dan, and that's obviously a huge problem. But the schools are just god awful in Chicago. I mean, you can't live in Chicago if you have kids, unless you have $1 million and you can send your kids to a fancy private school, because it just doesn't work. And you got a mayor who's just basically saying no school choice for parents.
On the macro stage now, we saw the inflation cool a bit more, and this is in advance of what Jay Powell may or may not do with respect to interest rates. So are we on the path to prosperity? Have we tamed the inflation dragon, and we're going to be growing again, and things are going to be hunky-dory, and market returns are going to continue to buoy people's 401ks, and it's all going to be good?
Well, so inflation was 9% last summer. The latest number that just came out yesterday is 4%. So 4% is still way too high. It's twice as high as it should be. But yes, inflation is coming down. The problem is the economy is just stagnant right now. For the last 6 quarters, so that would be, 20 months or so, you've had 1% growth in the economy, which is crazy. We should be growing at 3 or 4%. I mean, COVID ended 20 months ago. We should have had a boom coming out of it. And what did Biden do? He spent, by my calculations, $5.5 trillion we didn't have. And government doesn't stimulate the economy; it destimulates the economy. And so now you've got this massive problem. Incidentally, Biden had a piece in the Wall Street Journal on Friday crowing about how well he was doing on the economy, and he repeated the lie that he says all the time about how I've reduced, I'm sure you guys have heard him say this, I've reduced the deficit more than any president in American history. I'm the most fiscally conservative president. Do you know what the deficit is, Amy, over the last 12 months, the amount of red ink?
Trillions. $2.1 trillion. It's the highest amount of debt ever in the United States, except for the COVID year when we basically completely shut down the American economy. I mean, $2.1 trillion, and he's crowing about how he's reducing the deficit. I mean, we passed this debt reduction bill, Dan, but that's truly a Band-Aid on a cancer patient.
Well, here's what Illinoisans are hearing from their duly elected governor. J.B. Pritzker on ABC yesterday on President Biden. He's very flattered that you think he should be president, Steve, but he's backing Biden. Take a listen.
Okay.
Run for president, but President Biden has done a terrific job. Remember, he brought us out of the COVID pandemic. I mean, he made sure that those vaccines got into arms across the country, and that's why we're able to be open and free now. And President Biden is somebody who carries with him an enormous amount of empathy. I think that's something that Americans really admire about him.
Where's your empathy, Steve?
Yeah, I was going to say, I do admire his empathy. I mean, he just cares so much for his element.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I mean, he cares so much, and he cares so much about his son. He cares a lot about his son.
An addiction problem.
It's a comical answer. I mean, everyone knows that. Remember, it was a week after the election. I've always thought this is very suspicious when you talk about stealing elections. It was a week after the election that Pfizer announced they had the vaccine. That happened because of Operation Warp Speed, one of the few great government programs of all time when we basically just deregulated and said we're not going to let the FDA and the CDC get in the way of getting a vaccine out. And that vaccine, I know people are skeptical about vaccines, but the original vaccine probably did save 1 million lives. I don't think anybody's ever thanked Donald Trump for that.
I think a lot of people are skeptical of the vaccine mandate that the vaccine
Yeah,
mandates, plural, that Pritzker is
totally.
touting, and I know you are as well.
Yeah, I'm totally against mandates, but my body, my choice, right?
Yeah.
But the economy was growing by six, in the 6 last months of Trump's presidency, by like 11%. We were booming out of this, and Biden actually slowed it down. So we got to get that history right. I think the economy's just in a rut. Slow growth. 70% of Americans today think the economy's headed in the wrong direction, and you know what? I think they're right.
Steve Moore, economist, Govzilla author. Steve, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Okay, guys, have a great day.
All right, you too. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer.
Your show keeps me alive during the week. There's nobody I'd rather listen to between 5 and 9 in the morning than you guys.
On AM 560, The Answer.
Signature Bank is Chicago's fastest growing independently owned business bank. Your business and your money are in good hands with Signature Bank. I'm